Welcome to AK Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of Soul Land 3, Legend of the Dragon King Part 162. Without any delay, start explanation. However, it was not a complete body and was merely a giant skull. Its eyes were a bloody shade of red that reduced the initial violent imposing manner of the Dusksilver bear, suppressing it until it was close to nothing. Although it was a mere skull, that alone was far larger than the Dusksilver bear. Suddenly, it opened its mouth and let out a shocking howl. A mere 10,000-year spirit soul? Who wouldn't possess it? Overlord Dragon. Spirit souls were generally intelligent. The more powerful the cultivation base of a spirit soul, the greater its wisdom. When they reached the ranks of 10,000-year spirit souls, their wisdom would not be inferior, even to humans. The Dusksilver bear was definitely weaker when it came to intelligence if compared to other spirit souls on the same rank. However, it made up for this with its sharp instincts. What kind of a being was the Overlord Dragon? It was the one true Overlord. One that domineered terrestrial soul beasts and was a being that was already extinct tens of thousands of years ago. However, within its bloodline, I was the aura of the Golden Dragon King. It was one of the purest dragonkind soul beasts within the Golden Dragon King's direct bloodline. It was the true overlord of strength. Hence, when the roar of the Overlord Dragon's unyielding spirit soul sounded, the first thing that rose within the heart of the Dusksilver bear was fear, an extreme fear. It had been so aggressive before this when it was preparing its attack, but now, its body was curled up. However, it still had its momentum and continued its charge toward Tang San. Then, Feng Linwen saw a scene that left him staring with his mouth agape. The young boy who stood on the giant hammer suddenly bent over and his right hand began flickering with a golden light. Armed with sharp golden claws, he brazenly clawed into the black giant hammer's hilt. Although the giant hammers were forged from superalloys, it was as fragile as tofu in the face of his huge golden claws. Then, the giant 2,500 kilogram that was the pride of Feng Linwen was plucked up by the young boy from under his feet and thrown into the air. The force of his pull was a display of sheer strength. Clearly, the amount of force the young boy was exhibiting was definitely more than 5,000 kilograms. Boom! The giant hammer brazenly crashed onto the Dusksilver bear's body. It had never expected that the giant hammer, which was supposed to be its weapon, would ever be used against it. Only a short while ago, it had crushed countless opponents with that giant hammer. However, it was currently bearing witness to the terrifying strength the hammer possessed after it was at the receiving end. One could only imagine the depth of the pain brought about by the special effect crush. Bang! It was a direct hit on the Dusksilver bear's huge body by the giant hammer and it crashed toward the ground. Then, its momentum lessened. The black mecha was still able to bring the hammer to itself, and it soon flew toward its initial location. Naturally, it brought Tang San's body with it as it flew back. F***CK, Feng Linwen could not help and swore. Is this young lad even human? Is he even human? When he looked at Tang San, all he saw was a dragon in human form. However, as the most outstanding and promising youth in his organization, Feng Linwen's reaction was also exceedingly fast. He quickly severed the pull his mecha had on the giant hammer, causing the 2,500 kilogram hammer to fall downward in a free fall. Almost at the same moment, its body flashed and appeared by Tang San's side almost instantaneously as it swung its left hammer toward Tang San. No matter how strong you are, you're still a four-ringed soul master. There's no way you'll be able to fly no matter what. The moment Tang San felt the giant hammer fall, he immediately tugged on the hammer in mid-air. With the momentum, he turned his body around and directed the giant hammer toward the black mecha, throwing his body sideways. He was currently about 30 meters from the ground, and the black mecha had enough time to sway toward one side to avoid a head-on hit from the hammer. At the same time, it attempted to pull the hammer back into its grasp once more. During this time, Tang San's body was already flying sideways toward a faraway direction, putting some distance between them. I've to kill this human soul master. He's so young but already has 4 rings. What would he become when he gets older? A fierceness flashed in Feng Linwen's eyes. He had already locked onto Tang San. At this moment, a yellow mecha was in a collision course with Tang Wulin's flying body. The notion of seeking undue advantages was present in anyone's heart. The yellow mecha's weapon was a great sword, and instinctively, it hacked and slashed directly toward Tang Wulin. Huge blue-silver emperor vines ventured from behind Tang Wulin as if they had eyes. Then, his first soul ring flickered and the vines instantly coiled upward. The great sword hacked the vines from the blue-silver overlord transformation and did not even leave a scratch despite the immense force it was exhibiting. As the vines continued to coil around it, Tang Wulin flipped and landed on the shoulders of the yellow mecha as the vines coiled around the yellow mecha, wrapping it firmly. Feng Linwen and his black mecha had already quickly rushed over. Tang Wulin's vine swung and threw the yellow mecha within its grasp into the air. Feng Linwen took control of the black mecha and instantly decelerated. It then raised its right leg and used it as a shield to block the yellow mecha. After all, they were comrades, and losing control of one's mecha in mid-air was a very dangerous affair. However, this would not pose a problem as long as he could help steady its body. At this moment, a figure was seen appearing from the yellow mecha's waist. A flash was seen as it appeared before the cockpit of the black mecha almost instantaneously. It was then that an excited dragon's roar was heard, and a golden dragon's head exploded at the chest of the black mecha. When Tang Wulin threw the yellow mecha into the air, he had managed to use the blue-silver grass to pull him back onto its back. He managed to seize an opportunity to ambush the black mecha when it attempted to help the yellow mecha stabilize its body. Golden Dragon shocks the heavens. There was no way to evade the attack. Mechas were not humans, after all. No matter how skillful one was at operating them, it was impossible for a mecha to have the maneuverability of a human's body. However, the defensive prowess of a superior mecha was manifested at this moment. Amidst the dark light, a protective barrier exploded with Golden Dragon shocks the heavens, sending forth a glaring light. When the nearby yellow mecha was hit by such a powerful wave of energy, it immediately shot outward like a cannonball and crashed toward the ground. He was finally at melee range. At this moment, Tang Wulin's abilities had also erupted. The second soul ring on his body glowed, signaling the arrival of blue-silver impaling array. Under the blue-silver emperor transformation, the blue-silver emperor vine surged outward in a frenzy, flashing wildly like countless sharp spikes that stabbed the back of the black mecha's protective barrier in mid-air. The protective energy barrier of the black mecha weakened dramatically as it continuously got stabbed. As that happened, another peculiar vibration seemed to be taking an opportunity to invade. Feng Linwen discovered in shock that his black mecha was now obtuse. If this was the old blue-silver grass, the blue-silver impaling array could never have achieved this feat. However, it was now the blue-silver emperor that was enhanced by his 10,000-year soul skill, the blue-silver overlord transformation. Golden light flashed brightly on Tang Wulin's body as he unleashed the golden dragon body, dramatically increasing his strength once more. The flicker clearly seen within his eyes was one of stubborn wildness. At such a close range, Feng Linwen could clearly see the wild streak in his gaze. This was the first time fear appeared within Feng Linwen's heart. Almost without hesitation, he took control of the pair of giant hammers in his possession to launch a brazen counterattack, directly striking Tang Wulin's chest. However, the blue-silver emperor vines quickly weaved themselves into a shield behind Tang Wulin. Surprisingly, he did not dodge the attacks but maintained the balance of his body in midair with a mere blade of blue-silver grass twined around the black mecha. Countless more blue-silver emperor vines protected his back. On his right hand, the glow of the golden dragon claw shone brightly. With the enhancement of his golden dragon body, it increased several-fold in size once again. Its tips were swallowing and spewing golden light at the same time. Humph! Feng Linwen grunted furiously. Sitting in the pilot's cockpit, his body also shone brightly. 2 yellow, 3 purple and a black soul ring, all 6 of his soul rings glowed. He infused his mecha with soul power and suddenly, the surface energy of the black mecha increased tremendously. Boom! Both hammers counterattacked, striking mercilessly on the blue-silver vines behind Tang Wulin. Although the defensive powers of the blue-silver emperor that had undergone the blue-silver overlord transformation was amazing, the hammer still landed on Tang Wulin's back from the all-out onslaught of the superior black mecha. However, it was also at this moment that the soul ring on Tang Wulin's body switched to two golden ones. The second soul ring flickered and his body burst forth with a luster, making it seem almost mirror-like. At the same time he was hit, a great dragon's roar arose from within Tang Wulin's body. The golden glow on his right arm's golden dragon claw suddenly increased by half a foot in length. He drew support from the terrifying impact behind him and directly clawed at the black mecha's pilot's cockpit. He can even block that. Feng Linwen's brain was momentarily blank. Those were giant hammers with a shocking weight of 2,500 kilograms. With the addition of the super mechas and his own strength, they would have been as heavy as thousands of kilograms. He can even block something like that? Above the great ocean, 2 months of steeling himself had not been in vain. The ultimate goal of the body sect was to stimulate the human body's potential and turn it into the greatest weapon. Compared to his time on Doluor continent 2 months ago, Tang Wulin's current strength was far more powerful than it was. The strength of his body was even a few times greater than what it once was. When the Blue-Silver Emperor awakened, his body had also undergone a transformation, turning his entire world upside down. In terms of survivability, even Wu Zhongkong might not that much better than him. At this moment, Tang Wulin was displaying the full extent of his body's abilities and strength along with the abilities of his martial soul and bloodline. This attack contained the strength of the Golden Dragon shocks the heavens, the enhancement of the domineering Golden Dragon body, and the inertia from the blows of the two giant hammers. The defenses of the Black Mecha shattered in an instant. The Golden Dragon claw brazenly grabbed hold of the mecha's cockpit. Amidst the ear-piercing sound of tearing metal, a golden light flickered before everyone's eyes. As Feng Linwen looked on in fear, the fifth soul ring on his body erupted and he transformed. His physique suddenly buffed up and he crossed his arms in front of himself. His martial soul was the Dusksilver Bear. There was no doubting the defensive powers of the Dusksilver Bear. Great strength was its core trait. But in the face of the Golden Dragon Claw, this defensive power appeared weak, even with his Soul Emperor cultivation base. Tang Wulin's current Golden Dragon Claw was the combination of his four-ringed soul power, the blood essence power of his entire body, and the enhancement of domineering Golden Dragon body which created a force of thousands of kilograms. PSHHH. Both of his thick arms were impaled in an instant. The enormous dragon claw had pierced all the way to his chest before it was stopped by the Dusksilver Bear's muscles and bones after he forcibly utilized his six-ringed soul power. A little more, just a little more. Feng Linwen could no longer care about the intense pain in his arms. All the fine hairs on his body stood on end. He had never expected that a young man who was merely a four-ringed soul ancestor would get so close to threatening his life. Close? Starlight began sparkling brilliantly on the Golden Dragon Claw. The pressure on the Dusksilver Bear's arms was instantly lifted. Sharp dark golden blades shot out from the points of the Golden Dragon Claw. Battle armor. His final howl was filled with dismay. Feng Linwen looked on as the dark golden blade stabbed mercilessly into his chest. The light in his eyes quickly dimmed. At that moment, his mind coursed with regrets. He regretted the fact that he had taken his enemy too lightly out of carelessness, but more than regret, he was amazed. He had never thought that there was a soul master in existence who could accomplish such a feat at 4 rings. Tang Wulin's dull, staring eyes were now mixed with a dash of relief and relaxation. With a puff, he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood, splattering it on the surface of the black mecha. A massive blow of thousands of kilograms to his back, how could he be unscathed? The black mecha brought him and the pair of giant hammers along as they dropped from the sky straight toward the ground. The battle was still in full force. The trio of Yuan and Yehui, Yu Jingyu and Yi Xinglan had formed the toughest combat force of the Shrek team. However, at the moment, the ones who had annihilated the highest number of enemies were not them. A star wheel appeared silently under the feet of a yellow mecha. The yellow mecha froze instantly as it lost all control from the inside. Shortly after, it dropped down hundreds of meters from the sky. The star wheel ice staff shone again. Countless sparkles of starlight flickered all across the skies. The attacks of the mechas suddenly went into disarray. Their volley turned into a scattered shot. Some of the attacks even landed on their neighboring mechas, which exploded in a flurry of sparks on their protective barriers. The controlling abilities of Xu Xiaoyon's Star Wheel Ice Staff were on display. She coordinated her attacks with the other three and Gu's long-range attacks. As they faced the dozen or so mechas, they held their ground without giving the slightest concession. They did not even take half a step backward. The students of the Royal Star Luo Academy who were rescuing the casualties in the Soul Train were long dumbfounded at the sight. In their eyes, the scenes that played before them were unbelievable. They were all at 4 rings, but how could they perform feats that they themselves dared not to even imagine? Yuan and Yehue leaped into the air and curled up her body. 2 punches of her air cannon blasted away 2 beams of light at the enemy. Her body suddenly shrunk in midair as a pair of black wings unfurled on her back. She accelerated instantly and moved like a dark purple shadow. She flashed past the side of a yellow mecha that was unable to dodge in time. On her arms, the glow from her dark purple battle armor shone brightly. Her shadow demon sword burst forth with a glaring flash. It terrifyingly cut down the legs of the yellow mecha. Without the thrusters on its legs, the mecha quickly fell from the sky. Golden light shot outward from Yu Jingyu's entire body. He had instantly caught up with Yuan and Yehue in midair. The colors of black and gold fused into one. The fusion of fallen angel and holy angel did not appear too harmonious. However, within the chaos, a brilliant sword's gleam which flickered in black and white flashed across the sky. A purple mecha exploded in the air, looking like resplendent fireworks. "Captain!" Xu Lixi yelled. What he saw was the instant where the black mecha's pair of giant hammers launched their counterattack. Everyone then saw the burst of golden light and heard the gleeful dragon's roar. The black mecha was falling from the sky. Gu's body flashed with a silver light and she was already airborne. With another flash, she went under the black mecha. Just when she was about to make her move, a figure flipped out from the black mecha. It stepped against the mecha to slow its descent. Gu's eyes beamed. A ray of silver light shone from her staff. In the next instant, the figure was forcibly pulled toward her. There were traces of blood at the edge of Tang Wulin's lips, but in his eyes, there was only excitement. This was his first time destroying a black mecha? An actual super mecha? Additionally, his opponent was at the rank of a 6-ringed Soul Emperor. Even if all this was because his opponent was taken by surprise as Tang Wulin's sudden burst of strength left him with no time to react, the results were clear. He had succeeded, with his valiant strength, in forcibly defeating such a powerful opponent. If he was able to do that, these minor wounds he had sustained were nothing. "Are you injured?" Gu asked with care. "I'm all right. Let's get down." "I want that pair of hammers," Tang Wulin said to Gu. Silver light flashed as Gu held Tang Wulin and teleported to the ground. The super mecha lived up to the word super. Although it had crashed down from the sky, other than the puncture wounds on its chest, there was no other sign of damage. Tang Wulin fearlessly picked up the pair of giant hammers which were as long as 5 meters. He had no golden dragon claws on his left hand, so he used his right hand to scratch some marks into the other hammer so that it was easier for him to get a grip on it. Then, with one in each hand, he raised both of the massive hammers. The edge of Gu's lips twitched. She quickly retreated backward. This guy was getting stronger and stronger. Tang Wulin waved his arms. He tapped the ground with the tips of his toes and started swirling rapidly on the spot. In no time, bursts of foul wind spread out in all directions. When the mechas that were attacking them from above saw this scene, all of them quickly soared toward higher altitudes. The pressure on Yuan and Yehue and the others lightened instantly after that. Nobody wished to collide with those terrifying hammers. That would have cost them their lives. Just then, a loud and shrill howl suddenly came from afar. A large patch of black dots flew quickly toward their location. The green skeleton mecha unit members who were launching their attacks had received new orders and quickly made their retreat. The reinforcements had finally arrived. From swirling, Tang Wulin gradually slowed to a stop. It took all he had to steady himself. The pair of giant hammers dropped to the ground, and he could not help but pant heavily. There was a worrisome feeling in his chest. His previous wounds had somehow worsened after he strained himself again. The red mecha which was fighting with Elder Cai flashed and retreated at its incredible speed. It flew in a circle in the sky and blocked many of the follow-up attacks. Elder Cai did not give chase. Instead, she descended from the sky and stopped in midair. Protecting the diplomatic corps was more important than crushing the enemy. In this situation, she would not take risks. The green skeleton mecha unit retreated very quickly. The reinforcements which came from Star Luo Empire were clearly military. They were all standard mechas numbering as many as 300 units. Some of them were dispatched to protect the people below, but the majority of the remaining mechas pursued the green skeleton mecha unit. Tang Wulin sat heavily on the ground. He rubbed his chest and bared his teeth somewhat. However, when he saw that huge black mecha beside him and the pair of giant hammers beside his hands, he could not help but laugh. These objects were worth far more than their monetary value alone. The little money grubber stood up. His hand flashed with light and a yellow mecha appeared beside him. It was his own mecha. He quickly opened the hatch of the black mecha's cockpit, pulled Feng Linwen's corpse out of it and placed it at the side. He then stored the black mecha and the pair of giant hammers in his mecha's storage space. The yellow mecha would not be abandoned either. Tang Wulin asked Wu Zhongkong to help him keep it for now. Teacher Wu had a large spatial storage unit. He worked extremely quickly. When the reinforcements arrived at their position, he had already finished all his business. His companions gathered around him, watching all that he did. Yu Jingyu stared with his mouth agape and said, "Captain, since when did you have such a large storage space? What's the matter with this yellow mecha?" Mine, all mine." Tang Wulin chuckled. "Finders keepers." Yu Jingyu kept his eyes locked on Tang Wulin. Tang Wulin laughed. "Relax. Teacher Wu also defeated a black mecha on his side. Everyone's going to have a share." The only ones who were genuinely interested in mechas among them were Tang Wulin and Xu Lixi, while the others spent more of their energy on battle armor. Even so, every part of a high-grade mecha was a greatly prized treasure. All else being equal, the value of such an amount of alloy alone would be difficult enough to estimate. Besides, though high-grade mechas were difficult to control by others due to the incompatibility with their own martial souls, modifying one so that it was suitable for oneself was much easier than building a new mecha from scratch. Feng Linwen's former mecha was a rare humanoid mecha in the Green Skeleton Rebellion's ranks. It greatly resembled the style of the mechas on the Dolor continent. Naturally, it would be the easiest to modify. On the Star Luo Empire's part, their reaction was quick. Up to 100 mechas formed a protective barricade around the Soul Train. The medical mechas had landed and started to heal the wounded and rescue the dying. Wu Zhongkong descended from the sky and landed beside them. When he saw that everyone was all right, he nodded slightly and did not say much. Still, his gaze had lingered longer on Tang Wulin. Even if the people far away did not see the way Tang Wulin destroyed a black mecha, how could Wu Zhongkong, who was always keeping tabs on them, not notice? At that time, he was already prepared to fly in and rescue them should the need arise. However, he had never thought that Tang Wulin would be able to destroy a black mecha on his own. This was no longer a question of power. This young boy had grown again, and his martial soul seemed different from before. As a teacher in Shrek Academy, and as an alumnus of the academy itself, Wu Zhongkong had seen many students who were greatly endowed with natural talents. Yet, this was his first time seeing an oddity like Tang Wulin. When he first laid eyes on him, his martial soul was nothing more than the blue-silver grass. However, with the passage of time, not only had he displayed shocking determination and hard work, his natural abilities were also changing continuously as well. Now his strength enabled him to obtain the position of leader on his team, and it seemed that his natural endowments had progressed accordingly. Tang Wulin sat cross-legged on the ground. He utilized the mysterious heaven method to heal himself. The main injuries he suffered were from the concussion. With the defensive abilities of the blue-silver grass, the actual damage he received was not too severe. The Soul Train and its tracks took a heavy toll. It was obvious that they could not transport passengers anymore. From the Star Luo Empire, luxurious Seoul buses were sent to fetch them. The hundreds of mechas also stayed behind to act as their escort. This attack had come too suddenly, but at least there were not too many casualties. That being said, as this matter involved both continents, it was a terrible diplomatic issue. Fortunately, all this was of no concern to Tang Wulin and the others. These problems were naturally left to the higher-ups to deal with. The ambush had clearly shown them that the Star Luo continent was not entirely peaceful, nor was it a safe haven. We've already gathered intelligence about this situation. The faction that ambushed us was an organization called the Green Skeleton. They are a rebel movement within the Star Luo Empire. They have a formidable strength and have occupied 2 provinces of the Star Luo Empire which are strategically located and difficult to access. The Empire has engaged them in large-scale battles many times, but they've never succeeded in wiping out the rebellion due to the many experts at the helm of the group. All they could do was minimize their territory. Their ambush this time was clearly aimed at intensifying the conflict between the Federation and the Empire to buy themselves more time. It was very easy to discern the current state of the Green Skeleton Rebellion. Besides, after this battle, Tang Wulin and the others had familiarized themselves with the students of the Royal Star Luo Academy. Immediately after they were ambushed, if it were not for Tang Wulin's timely assistance, these Royal Star Luo Academy students would have been hurt as well. Moreover, the strength that they displayed after that had made the Star Luo students completely erase the thought of making enemies out of them. The scene of Tang Wulin destroying the Black Mecha had left too deep an impression on them. That was unfathomable. Especially when he picked up the giant hammer and struck down the Dusksilver bear. The gaze of the few female students from Royal Star Luo Academy was noticeably different from before. Tang Wulin, how come you're so strong? How heavy was that hammer? A female Royal Star Luo Academy student asked with a curious look. Huh? It's not heavy at all. I think it's hollow. Tang Wulin put on a stone-faced look. I'd be stupid to believe you. Other than the engraving of the core circuits, how could a super mecha's weapon be hollow? Then why are you asking me all this if you knew the answers all along? Tang Wulin, do you know your emotional quotient? Ack, my chest, it hurts. I was injured just now. Let me sleep for a bit. Entertaining someone was definitely not Tang Wulin's forte, especially when he had no intentions of becoming good friends with these Royal Star Luo Academy students. Xie sat at the end of the Seoul bus. The rest of the Shrek team had unanimously agreed to this arrangement. The fellow was an honest-to-God jinx. He even seemed to have the frightful ability to turn the impossible into reality. Xie actually felt that they were being unfair to him. However, when he saw the nasty glares everyone gave him, he silently went to his assigned spot at the back of the bus and drew circles. Under the protection of the mecha escort, the remainder of the journey was smooth and uneventful. 2 days later, they finally arrived at the capital of the Star Luo Empire, Star Luo City, which sat in the core region of the Star Luo continent. Star Luo City was vast, but it still had surrounding walls which were already a rare sight on the Doluo continent. It looked more like an ancient city. There was an array of soul weapons on top of the walls which formed the defense system of the city. This had further highlighted the turmoil of the Star Luo Empire. However, once they entered the city, familiar sensations started to appear. The streets were full of bustling crowds. Other than the architectural styles and the fashion sense of the people being slightly different from the Doluo continents, there were not many differences. After sailing on a ship for such a long time and being worn out by the long journey, they had finally arrived at a city. The people from Shrek Academy felt at ease. Their accommodation was arranged at the luxurious Grand Star Luo Hotel. Perhaps to compensate for the shock that the diplomatic corps members experienced, even students like Tang Wulin and the others were accommodated in extremely splendid suites. The Grand Star Luo Hotel had an extravagant architectural style. Gold and white were its main themes. The building appeared as if gold and jade vied with each other at all corners. The moment he entered the room, Tang Wulin face-planted himself on the bed. In truth, he was not that tired. Given his body's condition, it was not easy for him to get physically fatigued, However, his spiritual fatigue was apparent. Compared to the others, his 2 months in human torture had undoubtedly raised his spiritual power, but it had also brought with it a generous amount of lethargy. Now, his only wish was to have a nice, long sleep. He quickly faded into unconsciousness. Soft beds easily made people feel like they needed rest. Unfortunately, right at that moment, someone suddenly knocked on Tang Wulin's door. "Who is it?" Tang Wulin sounded groggy. "It's me," came a familiar voice. Tang Wulin got up unwillingly. He went over and opened his door. Was that not Guu on the other side? Guu saw his sleepy look. "You tired?" "I'm so sleepy." Tang Wulin returned to his bed and sprawled across it. Tang Wulin's consciousness blurred again. Guu had already made her way slowly to the side of his bed. A dash of faint silver flashed in her eyes. However, her expression seemed to say that she was struggling with something. "Wulin, did your martial soul evolve?" Guu asked softly. Tang Wulin answered amidst his fleeting consciousness. Guu placed her hand lightly on his shoulder. If Tang Wulin had been paying attention, he would have noticed that round, silver scales had appeared on the back of Guu's hand. "The bloodline in your body should have been strengthened as well, right? The Overlord dragon that we met the other day, it turned into your spirit soul." Guu continued to question him softly. Even when he was half asleep, Tang Wulin took no precautions against Guu. Guu's eyes suddenly changed. Her pupils instantly turned into vertical slits. She slowly lifted her hand from Tang Wulin's shoulder, the scales on the back of it flickering with silver light. All this only lasted for an instant before she returned to normal. She pulled the blanket and placed it softly on Tang Wulin. She then closed the curtains for him and left his room in silence. Tang Wulin's breathing was even now, and he fell into a deep sleep. When she returned to her room, Guu shut her door. She waved her right hand gently. A faintly glowing layer of silver enveloped the entire room. Amidst the gloomy darkness, a figure appeared noiselessly. It was a man whose entire body was enshrouded by a black cloak. "Why did you not attack?" Even the Overlord dragon's spirit soul surrendered itself willingly to him and chose to be his own. That was enough proof that the Golden Dragon King bloodline within him is extremely pure. It's supposed to be impossible for the bloodline to be born on the Dolor continent. There must be some reason behind this. Once you extract his bloodline from his body, everything will come to light. By then, if you can absorb the bloodline, then maybe you can dash. Enough. Guu's tone was ice cold. She had hardly raised her voice, but the words of the man clad in the black cloak stopped abruptly. He then fell on one knee and lowered his head. "You may leave. We need to speed things up." "I've already thought of a way," Guu said flatly. "My lady, what about Enea? Will we continue to simply let her be like this?" the man in black said with a soft voice. Guu responded dryly, "That's also one of the reasons why I haven't touched Tang Wulin. Everything happened because of him and must be resolved by him. I must complete my wager with Enea. After all this is settled smoothly, I'll naturally make my move on Tang Wulin. What you need to do is to take charge of everything that we have to control here as soon as possible." "Yes," the man in black answered politely and slowly stood up. Without a sound, he merged with the gloomy darkness once again and vanished without a trace. Guu waved her right arm, and the silver color within her room silently disappeared. She went to the window and gently pushed it open. Her gaze traveled outward. It was already dusk, and the last remnants of the setting sun's rays were gradually fading. The night was upon them. The thoughts on her mind slowly turned into a hollow nothingness, and her spirits faded. It seemed that at this moment, everything had suddenly become insignificant. Guu clearly felt that she was slightly lost and perhaps confused. When Tang Wulin woke up from his sleep, he felt completely refreshed. He stretched his lazy bones, and his stomach instantly made a sound like thunder. He was very hungry. Surprisingly, he had not eaten anything before he fell asleep the day before. That was unforgivable. Tang Wulin suddenly missed teacher Mu Yi. Although when Mu Yi was with him, he was constantly undergoing the special training which was something like pure torture. However, there was a perk. After every the training session, teacher Mu Yi would bring him extra nourishing food. Within those 2 months, he had pretty much tasted every delicacy in the ocean at least once. That was also one of the main reasons his body had progressed so quickly. The injuries he suffered from when he collided with the Black Mecha had long since healed. The self-healing ability of his body was very powerful, so Tang Wulin did not have to worry in the least. Everything was completed in a clear and ordered pattern. He opened the windows and the fresh morning air rushed into the room. The gentle breeze brought a bit of morning dew and gave him a very fresh and revitalized feeling. He looked to the eastern horizon and waited for the first signs of dawn. Just then, the windows of the next room also opened. "Wulin," came Ji Yu's voice. "What's up?" Tang Wulin asked with a smile. Ji Yu looked at him and shook her head slightly. "It's nothing. I just wanted to call your name all of a sudden." Tang Wulin broke into laughter. "I think you came by last night, am I right?" I wanted to ask you out for a walk, but when I saw you were that sleepy, I gave up," Ji Yu said softly. "Sure. Then let's go today. We've been given 3 days to take a break, right? Just as well. I want to observe the local customs and manners of Star Luo City. Shall we invite the others as well?" Ji Yu shook her head. "I just want to go out with you. Let's not call the others." Tang Wulin was slightly stunned. However, a feeling of warmth suddenly surged within his heart. Although Ji Yu was always somewhat preoccupied with some issue or the other, and she sometimes even gave people the feeling that she disliked strangers, he could clearly feel that sense of reliance she had toward him. Knowing her for this long, she could have sudden mood swings and keep him at arm's length. However, whenever he was in some kind of danger, she would always appear by his side at a moment's notice. "All right." Tang Wulin agreed. "However, after I'm done with cultivating my purple demon eyes later, I want to go grab something to eat quickly. I'm super hungry." Ji Yu burst into laughter. "I thought it was strange that you went to bed last night without eating anything. That's so unlike you." "What's so unlike me?" Tang Wulin asked. "You're a glutton, after all. So that's what you think of me." "I'm sad." Tang Wulin put on an extremely grieved expression. Ji Yu smiled slightly. "Then don't have breakfast this morning if you can, and I'll take it back." "There's no need. I am a glutton." Tang Wulin instantly spoke sternly and forcefully. A faint purplish hue melted into his eyes. There was an indescribable warmth and comfort. Tang Wulin had the feeling that his purple demon eyes were on the verge of a breakthrough. After training for so long, this was finally a sign that he was progressing from the first stage to the second stage. The cultivation of the purple demon eyes was divided into 4 stages. The first stage was survey, the second stage was detailed, the third stage was mustard seed, and the fourth stage was boundless. It was said that there were only a handful who could cultivate the purple demon eyes to the third stage, let alone the fourth stage. However, the subtle improvements in the purple demon eyes were highly useful in the cultivation of spiritual power and during battles. Tang Wulin suspected that the main reason his purple demon eyes were about to be improved was due to his body's potential being stimulated by the body sect's cultivation method. That and the improvement in his spiritual power. "Ji Yu, how's your spiritual power now? Do you know?" Tang Wulin asked Ji Yu. "I don't know. In any case, it's higher than yours." Ji Yu's reply made it slightly difficult for Tang Wulin to breathe. "My spiritual power has also increased greatly as of late. Who knows, I might have caught up to you already," Tang Wulin said, unwilling to appear weak. Ji Yu rolled her eyes toward him. "You have an overactive imagination. How do you know that I'm not as good as you?" Tang Wulin could not help but blurt that out. Ji Yu said, "I'm no longer at the Spirit C rank." After she had finished, she closed her windows and returned to her room. "She's no longer at the Spirit C rank?" Don't tell me she's regressed, Tang Wulin had mumbled to himself up to this when he suddenly seemed to choke. Regressed? Of course, that was impossible. That much was evident from Gu's battle strength. Besides, human spiritual power grew as they aged. At least, before the age of 50, a person's spiritual power would only increase gradually and would not degrade. Then if her realm did not degrade, it could only mean that. Heavens! Could it be that she has broken through the Spirit Sea realm and reached the next rank? The cultivation of spiritual power was much more difficult than that of soul power. Tang Wulin knew clearly what realm came after Spirit Sea. But that should have been impossible, no? It must be impossible. After the Spirit Sea realm was the Spirit Abyss realm. The Spirit Abyss realm was like an abyssal prison, both heaven and hell. The upper boundary was heaven while the lower boundary was hell. Everything the mind could grasp was gathered into one. Peak spiritual power was fundamental to possessing a legendary spirit soul. At this rank, one could fuse with any level of spirit soul, even orange or red spirit souls. If somebody fused with an orange or red spirit soul, then their remaining power would only be at the Spirit Sea rank. However, if one didn't have an orange or red spirit soul, it was possible to fuse with a maximum of 5 spirit souls of any color, with no limits on their rank. Normally speaking, the Spirit Abyss realm was the limit for humans. This video will end here. Like video and subscribe to my channel.